Hey there! Today we're going to model and animate this cute butterfly. We will model the butterfly, we will animate the wings as well as the clumsy flight pattern for the butterfly. We will get into some UV unwrapping as well as some texture painting. Let's get started. Now because it's low poly, I'm going to do the body all in one section just to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to loosely follow that reference image. So for now, we're going to press S to scale, Control Z, and that's scaled on every axis except for Z. Control 2, give that a subdivision surface. Press period on the numpad and then just scroll out to your liking. Okay, I'm going to tab into edit mode. Press Control and R. We're going to create a loop cut in the center and then bring that up. And then we also want that third body part. So we're going to do another loop cut here and just bring that up a little bit. We're going to press 3 for face select. Grab that bottom face and scale that down a touch. Press O for proportional editing. Press Alt and select that bottom loop cut, and that will select the entire loop cut. 3, and then, yeah, just slide that back a little bit. Let's go ahead and rename this body. And then also get out of that. Press Shift and A. We're going to add a mesh plane. Press RX90, bring that up, and tab into edit mode. Press 1 for vertex select. And we're going to select half of our model, press delete or X on the keyboard, and we're going to delete vertices. That's going to leave us with these two. GX to move these over, and G and just freehand this one. For now, let's hide that body. And we're just going to put this somewhere here. We don't want to go too far in the middle because we don't want to overlap the wing on the other side. But what we're going to do now, I'm going to zoom in on this a bit. We only need to see this one wing for now. So what we're going to do is press E and just trace around this wing. And we're going to go all the way around, use as many vertices as you need. Okay, keep tracing around. I'll meet you back here in a minute. Okay, when you get to this last one, just make it somewhat close to the first vertice. Box select to select both, then press M to merge at the center. Okay, select all of the vertices just by pressing A, and then we're going to press F to add a face on that. And if we bring the body back in, that should go into the body, but we shouldn't have to worry about overlapping. Once we mirror this, which we're doing now, go to your modifier properties, add a mirror modifier, and then hide the body again, and just make sure that these two wings are not touching. If they are, you'll have some problems, but because they're not, that's excellent. Press Alt and E, and let's extrude faces along normals. We don't have to go too thick, but we want some thickness. Okay, tab out of edit mode. If you come up here to this drop down, let's take a quick look at face orientation. We can see that our wings are all wrong. You can see that our normals are wrong because they're red. We're going to tap into edit mode, press A to select everything, and then press Shift and N. If everything is blue, then you've corrected the normals. That's what we wanted in this case. Okay, so we can see our wings are pretty close. So that makes the body a little large by comparison. Let's just press S and bring the whole thing down. Okay, our wings are still going in. If your model is still blue, come back up here and tick that face orientation. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing for the bottom wings. Let's press Shift and A, add a mesh plane, press RX 90. That just brings it so we can see it a little bit easier. Tab into edit mode, one for vertex select, and then you can select whichever two you want. Press delete or X on the keyboard, delete the vertices, move this first vertice, and then bring this second one down. We're going to hide, actually let's rename the forewing, and then put that in the butterfly, and this plane here is going to be the hind wing. Press F2 on that. Okay, so we're going to hide the body and we're going to hide the forewing for a time. We can bring this up so we can see just this wing. We can't see too much of where this is going, but we can kind of guess based on this side here. So we're going to do the same thing, just trace around this wing. So E to extrude and then just trace around as you need to. And I'll meet you back here in a second. Now, the same thing in this section. We don't want to go too far over because we don't want to overlap. So I'm going to end that one there and bring this one back over a little bit. Box select your last two, press M to merge at the center. Press all of them by selecting A, then we're going to press F to fill that face, and then you can unhide your other wings, press Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and then just bring that back just a bit. And if it looks like it's too wide, you can bring it down just a bit. The smart thing to do would have been to make a note of what it was the first time, and I didn't do that in this case. So let's add a modifier, and let's make sure that those two wings are not touching, and they're not in this case. That's excellent. Same thing here. We want to make sure that our face orientation is good, and it is. So everything's blue. If you see red, just press that Shift and N to correct the normals. So now we have a couple of wings and a little body. All right, so if we look at our image, hold Shift and right mouse click to snap that 3D cursor. Press Shift and A. We're going to add a mesh cylinder, and before we do anything, let's just bring this down to an 8, 16. That's fine. Okay, so then scale this, S to scale, S to scale. It's going to be kind of small. E to extrude, E to extrude, E to extrude. No, like that was a little harsh. RX, slightly. E to extrude, RX. And just bring it back some. E to extrude, RX. Bring it back. RX. RX. Okay. Let's tab rotate on the y-axis just a little bit. Right click shade smooth. We're going to add a modifier. And we're going to select the body. So then G, X a little bit, or Y a little bit. Press O for proportional editing and then bring that in slightly. Get rid of proportional editing by pressing O. E to extrude, scale that down. Right click, shade smooth, shift, and snap that mouse. So they have compound eyes, but we're trying to make this low poly. So, and we're not going to see the detail of the eyes, so I'm just going to use an icosphere. Scale, 1, 3. And then we're going to mirror this. And we're going to use the eyedropper to select the body. And this we can add color just because we're not going to be doing texture painting on this one. Base color in this case will be a dark gray. If you want to see what that looks like, Z and 8. Z6 to come back out of that mode. And now we're going to begin working on the wings, which requires texture painting. However, before we do that, we're going to select, because we changed the size of pretty much everything. So we're gonna hit A to select all of our butterfly parts here. We're going to hit Control and A, and we're going to apply that scale. Don't forget to save your project. Save frequently. The next thing that we're going to do is go into the UV editing, and we're going to unwrap this model, this mesh, before we can UV paint it. So with the wing selected, go up to UV and then select light map pack and leave everything as default. Press OK. What this is going to do is a little bit nicer in some cases than Smart UV Project, is it will unwrap the UV and it will spread it out on the island so that you can get to everything a little bit easier. The next thing that we want to do is, with this wing still selected, let's go over to texture paint. Before we do anything, let's make sure that we have the Z mirroring selected so that when we do paint something, it will be on both sides. Currently there's no texture, so let's go ahead and make a texture. We're just going to use base color here, and the color will be whatever your butterfly wing will be. So whatever color you want that to be. I'm just going to use a blue. I want to come in here and get this hex value because we're going to use this on the lower wing. Okay, now that we have that hex color, you see that that changed everything on the UV map. Pick the black color, and we can just use the switcher down here. Makes it a little bit easier. You don't see the switcher up here. I always find it down here. So what you want to do is make sure that you have a marking on both sides. Now, it's a little bit hard if you're only using a mouse instead of using a drawing tablet. So what we can do is come down here where it says stroke. Let's expand that and tick this stabilized stroke. And what that does is it gives you this line. And instead of making a movement right away, it will hold off. We can also adjust the fall off so that it's more or less. So that means that it's going to be fuzzy or not fuzzy. See, like that one's a harsher line. We may not want something quite that harsh. We can do something like that maybe. Okay, so let's get rid of all of these lines, and before we get rid of that last one, making sure that we have a line on both sides. If you want to resize the mouse, just hold the F key, F as in Frank, on your keyboard, and then move the mouse left and right. Right should make the brush size bigger, and left should make the brush size smaller. So depending on which part of the wing you're working on, finer details, you'll want a smaller brush. Larger details, you'll want a larger brush. You can also come back up here and hide the hind wing and the body or anything else that's in your way. You don't have to worry about painting the eyeballs because it's only going to paint the wings that you have selected. So with all of that, I'm going to get started painting my wing, and I will see you back here in a few minutes. Now, if you get to a point where you don't want the stabilization, let's just say you want to make some dots. Okay, so in this case, I do actually want to make some dots. So I'm going to switch this back to white, and I want some dots around these edges. So in that case, I don't want the stabilization to be on because it would make this portion too hard. Okay, so I'm pretty much done with my forewing, and it's important to note that you do have to make sure that you save this texture map. Okay, and now we're going to go to the bottom wing. So I'm going to select the bottom wing here and go to UV editing. Press A to make sure that you have the entire wing selected. Go up here to this UV menu and select the light map pack. Leave everything as default and press OK. You can see over here that it mapped it out nicely. Once that's done, we can go to the texture paint, and you'll see again here we don't have a texture. So let's go to base color. And this is where saving the hex value is going to come in handy. Pop that in, press OK. Make sure that you tick this Z. If you can't see it, just hold the middle mouse button and slide the mouse left and right to scroll that menu across. Once you can see the mirroring options, tick that Z and make sure that you have a brush stroke on both sides. Press Ctrl and Z to undo that. If you're using a mouse versus a drawing tablet, just tick that stabilize stroke under the stroke menu. You can also hide now the forewing and the body just to make painting the lower wing or the hind wing a little bit easier. Remember that it's F, left and right mouse move to control the size of that brush, and then left click to select the brush size when you're happy. Or do check the wings occasionally on both sides. If you're too far on the edge, you can get some overspray on the other side of the wing, which is not what you want. And an example of that, yeah, it would be like that. So that's not ideal. It's not pretty. If anything, have your model slightly tilted so that you can get those edges and the backside without having any issues. Okay, I'm going to get to painting my lower wings. I'll meet you back here in a few. Okay, so that is done. I'm going to go back over here and just make sure that my images are saved. And then we can go back to layout. If you hit Z and 8, you can see kind of what your butterfly looks like. I've got the lights hidden on mine, so it's hard to see, but that looks a little better. And change this light to a sun here and change the strength so you can see just a little better. So we're going to do a couple of things before we do the animation, just some housekeeping stuff. Let's come up here to the mirror modifier properties, and if you notice when we do RZ, the wings are not moving correctly, and that's because we have to choose our body as the pivot point. Now when we do RZ, they pivot correctly. So let's do the same thing for this bottom. And RZ just to check it, right mouse click to release that. And then another problem that we may run into, if we take a look at the bottom, if we pivot these all the way in, RZ, so you can see they're overlapping quite a bit, RZ. So I think the wings need, the lower wings at least, need to come out just a tiny bit. So GX, just to bring those out. Now RZ, GX. Now RZ. That's better. They're not overlapping, and that's what I wanted. If you Control Z, you have to bring them out again. GX. Just like that. Now let's check them both. RZ. Okay, that'll be fine. So now, make sure you're on frame 1. Bring this out so you can at least see the 5s. So we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to parent all of the extremities to the body, so make sure that you select the body last. It's going to be a lighter color outline than the others. Press Ctrl and P, object, keep transform. And what that does is when we pivot this body RZ, it'll make sure that the eyes and everything will pivot along with our body. In this case, because it's low poly, we didn't do the 3 separate sections for the butterfly, but if you're doing high poly, you probably want to break those out to individual sections. For the wing animation, let's go ahead and drag this timeline up a little bit, and then if you need to, just roll the mouse wheel so that you can see at least the 5s. We're going to animate both the upper and the lower wing at the same time. So select the upper wing, shift select the lower wing, and turn your model so that you can see it. We want to set an initial keyframe in this neutral location. So with both wings selected, press I. Let's set the location and rotation. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to start our animation on frame 5. The point of having this first animation keyframe in the neutral spot is if we need it to nix our animation and start over. Before we do any animation, tick this auto keyframing. It'll just make animating something like this a lot easier. So now we want to press R and Z and then bring the wings back so that they're about there. Okay, so you can see it's a pretty good starting position for our wing. Come out to frame 10, come out to frame 10, and then we're going to press R and Z and bring the wings almost halfway to about there. And then for frame 15, R and Z most of the way forward. And then 20 should match 10, so we can duplicate that one. And 25 should match 5, so we can duplicate that one. So now you can see that we have a pretty good wing animation. I think right about there, I just want to kind of emulate butterflies have a figure 8 pattern. So I want to do R and X just to bring the wings back slightly. Okay. So then we can actually stop this on 25 and then play through that animation. That looks good. We're going to begin working on the flower. So press 7 on the numpad and press Shift and right mouse click somewhere in front of the butterfly. We're going to press Shift and A to add a mesh circle, and we don't need 32 vertices, so bring that down to about 16. Tab into edit mode, press 1 for vertex select, press A to select everything, and then we're going to E and Z to extrude on the Z axis, and just bring that down a little bit, and then S to scale that in, and F to fill that face. So that'll be the bottom part of our flower. Go to the top vertice, select the entire ring, press E to extrude up, Z to stay on that Z axis, then one more time E to extrude, Z to stay on the Z axis, and then S to scale that in, and press F to give that a face. Press 3 for face select, go to the bottom, E for new topology, enter, and then we're going to scale this in quite a bit. This is going to be the stem of our plant. E, Z to extrude that down. You can give it some shape by rotating it. E, rotate it again maybe, and then E to extrude it down. Tab out of edit mode, we're going to right click shade smooth. Press 7, select in the center of your flower. Press Ctrl and A. We want to mesh plane. Press G and X to move that over slightly. Tab into edit mode, select 2 or edge select. Let's scale this in, and let's add 3 loop cuts in this horizontal direction. Press Ctrl and R again, and we'll do 3 loop cuts in the vertical direction as well. Press 1 for vertex select. We're going to press O and roll your mouse so that you influence the rest of the petal and just bring that out to give it more of a petal shape. You can also use just so it has a little bit of a shape to it, and then press A, and we're going to press E to extrude and Z to stay on the Z axis. Press R and Y just to tilt that down into the base of the flower a bit. Make sure it overlaps pretty well. And we're going to right click Shade Smooth. Now press 7 and we're going to add an array. And the offset that we need is not X, it may be Z, but we're going to come back to that in a second. Let's tick this object offset. And the object that we're offsetting is the center here. Press 7 just to make sure you're in top view, and then press R to move your petal around. Once you have the first one done, if you change the count, you should see that you have the correct number of petals to wrap around the circle, and then R and Z just to tweak the petals to your liking. Now when you come here, you'll see that that Z is impacted. So what you can do is just play with the Z factor until your flower is lined up. We can also come back to this flower. What we're going to do is add some color to that. So we don't have the colors that we need for the flower. Let's go ahead and add, we'll call this one yellow. And I'm under the material properties, which looks like the little world. So we're going to change the base color so that it's something that looks like a flower color. And we don't want all of it. We may have to go tab into edit mode. Before we do this, let's add a color. And here we want green. Okay, so that's going to be in the majority of the flower. And we'll make it a little bit darker. So press A, or you can tab out of edit mode, but press A, select everything. And we're going to change the order of things here. So it's going to be green first. Assign everything as green. Then come back 3 to face select. Press Control and plus until you have just this top. And then we're going to select that yellow and click Assign. So now if you go into press Z and 8, you'll see that our flower has color. You can tab out of edit mode. Kind of looks like an egg from the top, but it's fine. And my scene is a little bit dark because my camera was hidden. Press all parts of the flower and then you can just scale this down. I do kind of want a big flower for the butterfly to land on, so G and Y, let's move that over, and Shift A, add a mesh icosphere. S and then Shift and Z, and that'll scale it on the Y and the X, but not the Z. So just bring this out a little bit until we have a nice little area for our butterfly to fly around, and then put that material back on it. That was the dark green. You can expand this down, so press 7 and then press 9 just to get to the bottom. Circle select, we have that whole bottom selected. And press enter to get out of that. You see we have just the bottom except for this little panel, which we can deselect quickly. E to extrude, and then scale that in with S, and then that's fine. So we have a little floating ground for our butterfly. We're going to click on the UV editing. You can tab in edit mode, press A to select everything, and because this was a cube, it's already nicely unwrapped. So in this particular case, we don't actually need to unwrap this one. So we're going to click over to the texture tab. It's going to be nice and easy because the body was black and the spots are going to be white. So it's already set to white, and if I just come in here and start adding some dots, and then maybe a couple of smaller dots, and then I'll call this one done. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to call that done in this case and go back to the layout tab. So if we take a look at our butterfly again, flapping the wings, so the lower wings come forward a little more than I like. Select the 2 wings and let's take a look at these. Let's see, RX. Just bring that up a little bit. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is bring everything back here in the center. I'm going to do G and Y and just bring those back a tiny bit. And then I'm going to do Control A and I'm going to set that location. So we're going to do GY on this as well. And then I to set that location. And on 10, definitely forward too much. So GY on that, and then set that location. And this is just really picky. You don't even have to do this part. GY, and just bring that back so it's kind of the midsection of the body. I set that location. Same thing, GY, and just bring that back. Let's set the location. And 20 GY, GY a little bit more. And then set that location. I set that location. Okay, so now when we flap the wings, they kind of stay, yeah, where they're supposed to. So that looks good. Okay. So now, don't forget to save your project. Now what we're going to do is do the very clumsy animation of a butterfly. To do that, we are going to add a new empty. Press 1 and then Shift C and then Shift A, and we're going to add an empty plane axis. Okay, and this can stay in the butterfly because it's going to be part of the clumsy animation. So we're going to call this butterfly animation. And then scale that up so you can see it past the butterfly wherever it is. And then press Control A to set that scale. And then we want to select the body. And if you remember, everything else is already parented to the body, so we only need to do this once. Select the body and then select this empty last, and then press Control P and Object Keep Transform. So now if we rotate this, the butterfly rotates with it, and you see that we still have the wing animation. But if we start moving this around, the butterfly body is going to stay with it. Unhide the scene and the flower. Make sure that you're on frame 5 because that's going to be the first frame. And what we can do is move everything closer to the flower and rotate that just a bit. Rotate it more. It's completely up to you, your starting point. I'm going to go to frame 1 here, and I want to set this location and rotation because we're starting our scene on frame 5, if you recall. Okay, so right from here in frame 5, we're just going to make some clumsy motion, G and Z, and then R, X, and then I'm just going to kind of go randomly, G and Z, R and Y, and then G and X, like that. So if I G and X and R and Z, G and Z, R and Z, and G and X. Let's see what we got going on here. That might be a little bit too much of a jump. And then G and Z, and G and X, and R and Z, and G and Z, and R and X, and G and Z, and then R and Y, and G and Z, and R and X. All right, now that's a little fast compared to the wings. Okay, so we're going to press our upper wings, and we're going to go here to the graph editor. And we want to, somewhere in here, press Shift and E, and then we want to use Make Cyclic F Modifier. And we'll do the same thing for the lower wings. And then you can go back to the timeline. So what that does is it makes it so that our wings fly no matter how many frames our scene has. So we're going to bring this out to 100, and we're going to select on the empty here. And we need to space this out because it's a little too much speed right now, the animation. So that actually could be too slow, but we'll see. So I'm going to do, we're on frame 5 here. So 5, 10, we'll do 15, 20. We'll see what that looks like. All right, so snap back to the beginning and let's see. You know what? I don't like G and X on this one. That was too fast. And then here, G and X on this one, just to slow that down a little bit. There we go. And we only need to see the 5s. 30, 35. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. So then at 50, pause this. At frame 50, we want to continue our animation, bringing the butterfly to the flower. So here, let's do G and Z, and then R and Z. Okay, and then at 55, G and Z, and G and Y. No, G and X, and then R and Z towards the flower. And then G and Z, R and X. If you've ever seen butterflies, they don't fly straight to anything. They may fly to it and then decide that they don't want to be there. G and Z, R and X, G and Z, and then G and Y, and then R and X. Okay, so let's snap this back. I don't like it going from here all the way over to here so quickly. So I'm going to pull this over and I'll make this spread out just a little bit. So now let's snap it back. G and Z, and then R and Z, and G and X. Okay, let's snap that back. That's nice. I like that. And then frame, I'm going to go that to 250. All right, so there's something funky going on with our wings. Let's get rid of that keyframe. Okay, so I like that. I just slowed down the wing animation just a tiny bit. Okay, so now it's time to animate the camera. And we're going to do a couple of things here. One, don't forget to save your project. We're going to do a couple of things here with animating the camera, and that is we're going to come up close to the butterfly, and then we're going to circle around it. Come into the scene that you want, and then press Control, Alt, and Numpad 0. Go to the camera, make sure that you're selected on the camera. If you press numpad 0, you'll look through the frame of the camera. So then, like here, I would want to follow the butterfly at frame 5. So we're going to GZ on the camera. I kind of want to be like right there. So we're going to set a keyframe there for location and rotation. This is going to be our opening scene. So we're going to do frames on the 5. GZ on this because we want to come up and follow and frame up that butterfly. So let's set the auto keyframes here. So in this particular case, because we hadn't already selected that, we have to set a first keyframe, so location and rotation, and then just come forward, and then if you play the scene, so what we can do is RZ and then GX and then GY, just to kind of get a different view for the camera. And then here, let's GX a little bit, so we'll come out. And then here, let's GZ, reframe it, and then GZ, and that'll set that keyframe. So let's see what we have so far. Okay, following that nicely. Here, GZ, let's kind of move that down a little bit. And for 35, that's actually pretty nice. I like that one. But for 40, we need GZ. Does it follow nicely? GZ here. And that dips down again here. So yeah, do follow the butterfly. You have a fully animated scene with a butterfly. We could do one final thing, and that is change the color of the world. And to do that, if you come in here to shading, click on, instead of object here, select world. Instead of this gray, bring this up, and let's just make it a nice kind of sky blue color. And then go back to your layout model. You see that you have this nice green. It offsets the flower and the butterfly nicely. So You snap this back and watch the whole thing through the camera lens. All right. I hope that you've enjoyed this. Hope that you learned a couple of cool tricks, and we will see you next time.